Good morning. We are grateful to gather both online and some of us in person at the Unitarian Universalist Society of Coralville for inspiration, music, learning, and conversation. I am Lori Enlow, UUS member and your worship associate this morning. If you are visiting our service today, welcome. We hope you will find this service meaningful. As Unitarian Universalists, we don't believe all the same things, but we claim 6 sources of our living tradition. One of those sources is direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of spirit and openness to the forces which create and uphold life. This morning, our minister, Rev. Diana Smith, will be offering the message, and we have several hospitality team members in person welcoming those who have gathered at our UUS building. And now over to Rev. Diana for our call to gather.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Diana Smith, the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Society, and it is wonderful to be with you all this morning. In these times of change, it is so important to be together, to come together as a spiritual community, to gain the sustenance that we each and all need, and to help nourish each other. As members of a covenantal faith that expresses our core value of love through how we agree to be together and to support each other, it is good to come together and to affirm that even when we cannot yet all be together in body, this congregation remains strong and connected. And to affirm that we have faith and hope in this congregation, in each other, and in the ways we continue to grow together during the challenges of life. And to affirm that wherever any of us is on our life's journey, whether we come to worship with joy in our hearts, weighted with burdens, in need of rest, or searching for people to engage in the struggle with us, we are glad. And this congregation is glad that we are here. Today, during this time when hopes of returning to school and church in ways that were different from what we were used to, but still were a kind of new normal, are changing. And as we grapple with the reality of climate chaos, today we're reflecting together on what normal actually is and what we do when things decidedly aren't normal. And so as we begin our time together, I share these words with you by the Reverend Gretchen Haley, who wrote, "What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? In these days when we find ourselves too often stuck with these questions on repeat, what's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do?" We grasp at signs and markers, articles of news and analysis, Facebook memes, and forwarded emails, as if the new zodiac capable of forecasting all that life may yet bring our way, as if we could prepare, as if life had ever made any promises of making sense, of turning out the way we'd thought, as if we are not also actors in this still unfolding story. For this hour we gather to surrender to the mystery, to release ourselves from the needing to know, the yearning to have it all already figured out, and also the burden of believing we either have all the control or none. Here, in our song and our silence, our stories and our sharing, we make space for a new breath, a new healing, a new possibility to take root. That is courage, forged in the fire of our coming together and felt in the spirit that comes alive in this act of faith, that we believe still a new world is possible, that we are creating it already here and now. So come, Let us worship together.
Good morning. It's good to see some people in here. It's nice to be around people again. I wanted to tell you a couple things about this first hymn we're going to do. It's a hymn that was written last year for distanced worship, and indeed worship where we are not bodily together. Now I know there's quite a few people that aren't here with us, so these words will speak to them, but also to all of us. And it's to a pretty familiar tune to me, and I'm hoping it's a familiar old hymn tune for many of you as well. So I'll invite you to all sing along as you're able.
Gathered in the Spirit, though our bodies are apart, filled with joy and touched with wonder, separate hands but mingled hearts, giving thanks to singing praises for the love that calls us on from our many different places. Gathered into one. We are gathered in our sorrow. We are gathered in our fear, in our pain and in our worry, in our anger and our tears, as we tend to one another with our gifts and with our care. Our community is strengthened through the faith and hope we share. We are gathered in commitment to a planet that is whole, works of justice, acts of kindness, bless the world and heal our souls. As our voices join together, may our songs of peace resound. May we offer in abundance all the grace that we have found.
As Unitarian Universalists, we light a flame within a chalice as a symbol of sanctuary and safety, to unite us in our worship and to remind us of our ongoing search for the light of truth. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the wonder and mystery of this great gift. So let us now kindle the flame of our liberal religious heritage and renew our covenant of mutual love and care. Love is our doctrine, the quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to serve those in need. This we promise, this we covenant with life and one another. Each week, when we light a candle for justice and healing, we hold space for our understanding of interdependence, that our liberation is bound up with every other person's liberation, and our feelings of rage and heartbreak over the ongoing pandemics of illness and racism, the devastation of climate chaos, and the waves of trauma washing over our world. As the pandemic continues to take a terrible toll on people, feeding on divisiveness and systems of oppression, that have been allowed to fester, we light the candle of justice to help us hold space together for processing what is happening in our lives and in our world. We light this candle that we may not be numbed to injustice, devastation, illness, and trauma, but rather find strength, courage, and love together to continue engaging with the struggles for liberation, justice, and healing. Today, as we light this candle, we are particularly mindful of the tragedy and the peoples in Afghanistan and in the U.S. affected by this war, by Haiti, the earthquake in Haiti, and by the incoming Hurricane Ida, the coast of Louisiana. And now, let us hold a time of silence to listen to our bodies and hearts, or perhaps lift up prayers. As Alex plays our centering music, please take this time to sink more deeply into the presence of each other. In this time, we invite you into a practice of beholding each other. If you are online participating in the service and you'd like, please turn your cameras on and spend this time beholding each other's faces, each other's presence. If you're in the sanctuary, please take this time to behold the reality of each other. And please feel free to use the chat to let us know that your chalice is lit.
As we enter into this time of meditation and prayer, if you're online, please turn your videos back off. Unfathomable mystery. We come to this morning, this time together, with gratitude and wonder for morning showers, for storms that begin to brew, for bees busily visiting zinnias and goldenrod and the flowers of the season, for the acorns that fall smooth or fuzzy and the squirrels madly gathering them. With gratitude for people we love gathered in person and throughout the area, whose presence we can still feel. For wonder, for masks, vaccines, and people showing love and compassion through how we care for each other. And perturbing wonder, we come to this morning, this time together with hearts worn out from a week of returning to school and work with all the stresses of pandemic life. With hearts aching for people we love who are ill, hurt, or suffering. Hoping for Haiti and Afghanistan, for the people in the path of Hurricane Ida, fueled by climate chaos, for those on the front lines of Line 3 resistance, and with hearts worn by pandemic surging around us in our community, as we wonder how to respond faithfully and lovingly now. Spirit of love, as we hold all this and more this morning, help us remain connected to loving kindness, compassion, and justice. Help us reach out to, listen to, and support each other. Help us find strength, courage, patience, faith, and love to keep our hearts open, to find joy and gratitude, and to live love more fully into the meaning and reality of love and justice in this world. Amen. Blessed be.
You can join in if you like. The words are, when I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
Our RE moment for this morning is a story called Who Loves the Dark by Sherry Philibom. There once was a child who got lost in the woods. As night began to descend, the child became more and more frightened. And I'm sure any of us would be frightened too in that situation. But what made this child even more frightened was that he had always been afraid of the dark. He was more afraid of the dark than any of his friends or siblings. He didn't know why he was more afraid of the dark than his friends or siblings. He only knew that when the sun went down, he was always very glad to be inside of his brightly lit house. When the sun was all the way down, and the only light was just a tiny bit of light from the moon and the stars, the child got frightened, and all he could do was sit down and cry, which he did. Soon he heard a voice say, "What is all that racket?" He looked down and saw a mole squinting up at him. "I'm lost in the woods," he said, "and it's dark, and I'm afraid." "Well," said the mole, "perhaps you could take your noisy crying further down the path. I hate having to come out of my warm, comfortable, dark hole to tell people to be quiet." Then the child heard another voice. "Go on back in your hole, Mr. Mole. I'll take care of this." And the child looked up in the direction that his newer voice seemed to come from, and in the darkness he could see two glowing eyes looking down at him. Before he could scream, which was his first impulse, there was a flutter of wings and the creature flew down near him, and he could see that it was an owl who said, "Please excuse Mr. Mole. He hates to come out of his nice dark hole for anything, to be honest." At this, the child burst out crying even harder than before, because as frightened as he was of the dark, having non-human animals speak to him was beyond his experience and a little frightening in itself. "No need for that crying," said the owl. "If you just give me your address, I can guide you home." With that, the child did indeed stop crying, partly out of relief that someone might be able to lead him home, and partly out of curiosity as to how an owl could locate his home with or without the address. But deciding he had little to lose, the child choked back his tears and replied that he would be very grateful to be guided home, and gave the owl his address. So this strange pair headed off through the dark forest in what the child hoped was truly the direction of his home. When his fear left him just a little, the child looked around, and though the moonlight was dim, he began to notice his surroundings a bit. At one point, he noticed a kind of flower that he had never seen before, and slowed his pace just a little so he could gaze at it. "That," said the owl as they continued walking, "was an evening primrose. Did you know that there are some flowers that bloom only at night? There are moonflowers and night gladiolas too, flowers you would never see if you never went out at night." After a while, the owl said, as if musing aloud to herself, "And of course there are animals too, who love night and the darkness. Me, for example, I love the dark. In the daytime, the light hurts my eyes, so that's when I like to go into my tree and sleep." To this the boy replied, "Well, I like the daytime. I can see to kick a ball. I like the hot sun at the beach. When the dark isn't scary, it's just boring." "Boring, you say," replied the owl. And she clearly had some opinions to express on this point. But just then, there was a fluttering and a squeaking around their heads. It took the child just a few seconds to figure out what it was, and he shrieked, "A bat!" And he started flailing his arms to knock the creature away, shrieking the whole time. The shape backed away and, hovering just out of reach, said, "Excuse me, that's just my way of saying hello." "Well, hello to you, Mr. Bat," said the owl. "This child was out here lost in the forest, and I'm helping him find his way home. You're not hurt, are you?" "Well," said the bat, "I'll probably have a bruise on my backside, but I think I'll live." "But you're a bat," said the child, "a creature of darkness. Weren't you trying to drink our blood?" "No," said the bat, "but I've been eating lots of yummy insects who would have been biting you if I hadn't been around. Anyway, I couldn't help but overhearing what you said about the darkness being boring. If you want to come out just a little bit out of your way, I can show you something really exciting." "My parents always told me never to go any place with strangers," said the child. "Owl will vouch for me," said the bat. "We've known each other for years and years." Owl agreed that Mr. Bat was indeed an upstanding citizen, so the group went off the path and traveled through the deepest forest for what seemed like just a few minutes, and they came out into a dark beach. "Here we are," said the bat. The child gazed out at the beach, lit very gently by moonlight, and thought, "This is certainly beautiful, even in the dark, but I wouldn't call it exciting." And just then, there was movement in the sand, like a little bubble of sand rising up. Then there was another little bubble, and then another, and it looked almost as if the beach and the area they were looking at were boiling. Then, out of one of those little bubbles of sand, popped a rounded shape. "Looks like we got here just at the right time," said the bat. And as they watched, more and more shadowy shapes came up out of the sand, and soon the child realized what he was seeing. Lots and lots of baby turtles, hundreds climbing out of the sand. And this was truly exciting. Once each turtle shape pulled itself up out of the sand, it started crawling as fast as it could towards the water. "When baby sea turtles hatch," said Owl in a sort of teacherly voice, "they need to find their way to the water, and they almost always do this at nighttime. Because to find the water, they need darkness everywhere to follow the moon and star light that is reflecting off the water. Daytime sunlight is too bright, and it's scattered everywhere." "Oh," said the child. As they returned to leave and head back towards the child's home, Owl spoke again, as if thinking aloud to herself. "You know who else loves the darkness, besides all the nighttime plants and animals? The moon and the stars love the darkness. That's when they can really shine. Oh, they're there in the daytime as well, hidden behind a wall of light. But when that wall goes down with the sun, the stars and the moon reveal their beauty." After what seemed like a very short time, the child and Owl left the forest, walked down a street that the child recognized as his own. He was very happy and relieved, but also a little sad to say goodbye to Owl, to whom he gave a very gentle hug and a thank you. He went into his home and being extremely tired, got ready for bed right away. Before he went to bed, as a matter of habit, he bent down to turn on the nightlight that he always kept glowing through the night to keep the dark at bay. But before his fingers touched the switch of the nightlight, he smiled and pulled his hand away. He got into his bed, pulled up the covers, and let the comforting arms of the darkness soothe him to sleep. So now I'd like to take a few moments in silence, if possible, to think about the following questions. On your way in, you may have grabbed a piece of paper and some colored pencils. And I would like to encourage journaling, either writing down words or being very creative and reflective. And I'd like to add, and this is for everybody, including everyone at home, is there something that you're afraid of? And the second question is there something that you used to be afraid of, that during the past year or so, you've become less afraid of? And then hold on to your thoughts. And if you'd like to join me in the religious education engagement room in the conference room after service, hopefully we'll all be able to talk about them. Thank you.
So I'm going to tell you a couple more stories. So a couple weeks ago, I was actually out camping. I took my mom and I met up with my sisters and their kids in the Rocky Mountain National Park. Now, when we checked in to our campsite, we were told that moose liked to visit our campground. They told us that they had just been there the night before, the morning before, and if we were lucky, hopefully they would come back and visit us. They told us about the things to do, and so we got pretty excited. Well, the first night, no moose. Second day, no moose. Third day, no moose. We were starting to talk about moose, how much we wanted to see a moose. On the drive that day, we found a moose, and we were maybe 60, 70 feet away from those moose, and we thought, this is pretty cool. This is the closest we've ever been to a moose. They're pretty amazing animals. And then that night, as we were getting ready for our dinner, I was rinsing beans, and the kids were playing. Suddenly I hear this voice, Aunt Diana, there's a moose in the creek. There was a creek between the camp sink and our campsite, and there was a moose standing in that creek, all of 20 feet away from me and the kids. And so, of course, everything stops. Everybody stands there looking at the moose. People start flocking from different parts of the campground and coming in to look at this moose. And everybody is just standing far away from this moose, watching it. And then, you know what that moose did? It started walking up out of that creek into our campsite. Well, what do you do when the moose walks into your campsite? You stand there for a while, thinking, what do I do? And then when it was far enough away, we decided, well, it's not doing anything. It's very happily eating willow over there. So we kind of walked across the bridge and sat down and watched the moose some more. And that moose, it just kept eating. We watched it for about half an hour. Dinner's getting more and more delayed at this point, and tummies are starting to grumble. And finally, after about half an hour, the moose keeps kind of walking along and just sort of wandered further away, and we thought, okay, we're going to start making our dinner. And then that moose, you know what it did? It settled down about 15 feet from our picnic table where we were making dinner and just started chewing. Well, I don't really know if moose chew cud, but it just sort of sat there, lay down for a couple hours, just kind of the whole time. And so what do you do when the moose is chewing cud about 15 feet from your picnic table where you're making dinner? What we did was we just kept making dinner, watching the moose, but just making dinner, talking to it sometimes. And then, after we'd all eaten, it was starting to get towards dusk, starting to get dark, about time to go to bed. And you know what that moose did? It got up and wandered over to a willow bush about 10, 15 feet from our tent and started eating again. What do you do when a moose is eating willow 10 to 15 feet from your tent and it's time to go to bed? Well, we talked about it, we wondered about it, the kids were all pretty sleepy, so we went to bed. And we were okay. Now, we all have ideas about how things will go. We all have ideas about what's normal. The kid in Marcia's story who really liked the sunlight and didn't like the dark, he sure had ideas about what's normal and what's okay. You know, my family and I, we had these ideas about what's normal around a moose and what's not normal. Some of those ideas got challenged a lot. And when things don't go how we want, we have to find ways to respond to that and adapt. Sometimes what we're responding to is something scary and wondrous, like a moose in our campsite, right? Like that's not something we happen to have happen very often, but it's pretty wonderful and pretty exciting to get to respond to that. Sometimes the thing we're responding to that's not normal is being lost in the dark. And sometimes, like now in the wider world, we find that our hopes for ways that we wanted to return to school, to church, to society are disappointed. That they're not happening the way that we wanted. And instead we're having to find new ways to care for each other and the whole community's health. Now, when something like this happens, it can be helpful to look for lessons about how we can respond and adapt in ways that can help ourselves and others, and that give us space for our feelings, but also help us respond in some concrete way. Now, if you're online, you've got the chat box. If you're here, you've got your paper and your crayon and your colored pencils. And I'm going to invite you to add to your piece of paper or into the chat things that you've learned about how we respond when things decidedly aren't normal. What are some things you've learned that help you respond? Maybe it's something like watching what's going on and figuring out what seems to be happening, like we did when we watched the moose to figure out what was going on and if this moose was dangerous. Maybe it's something else. Add your things, and I'm going to share another story with you with some other lessons that I learned while I was in the Rocky Mountain National Park. So our last day there, last full day there, the parents, kids, and I all decided to go for a hike up a mountain. So it was a beautiful day, and we picked a place where we could hike up to 2 different alpine lakes at about 10,000 feet. It was gorgeous. We hiked up to the first lake, and then we started heading up to the second lake. And when we got to a lookout point, very close, about 3/10 of a mile to the last lake, everybody's looking out at this beautiful, beautiful scenery, the gorgeous mountains. And I looked over there, and what did I see but storm clouds coming? Now this is the mountains. I've been hiking mountains for 25 years. They were still pretty far off, and we were close to that lake. And I said, okay, we can get to the last lake, but we're gonna have to move fast. Everybody get going. We're gonna stop hanging out at this viewpoint if you wanna see the last lake. So we did it. We hiked up to the last lake, got there, and it was so gorgeous. This beautiful stream running out of it. Wonderful alpine lake, almost no trees because we're so high up. And what did we hear but thunder? The storm was coming in faster than I had anticipated because, after all, this is the Rocky Mountains. We got to spend 2 minutes at the lake, and I said, everyone, we are heading down the mountain because the storm's coming. And we were completely exposed. So I have 5 kids, 4 adults plus me. My younger sister, who's a school teacher and is used to leading groups of kids on hikes, she took the lead and I took the back because I had the most experience and I wanted everybody in front of me. I wanted to make sure that I had everybody together. And I said, we are going back down to the first lake. Well, Aunt Diana, why don't we just put on our ponchos right here and shelter here? We need to get under tree cover. And so I've got everybody heading down that mountain. We feel the winds coming. As we're heading down the mountain, I'm saying, go carefully but quickly, carefully but quickly. We just have to keep going down this mountain. Kids are wanting to stop on the trail and pull on their ponchos. No, we just have to keep going because the rain's not coming yet. The rain hasn't hit us, and we don't have much time, and we need to get under tree cover. So we just keep heading down that mountain, carefully but quickly is what I keep calling after those kids and those adults. Go carefully but quickly. And what do you know? We made it to that first lake. We got under a tree. Kids start pulling on their ponchos. And within a minute, the hail hit us. But we were under the trees. We made it to where we wanted to be, and we were safe. And that is a story that is going to be in family lore until the end of our days. And it will get embellished, and it will be wonderful. And it's a story of what happens when things don't go the way we plan, and we've got to learn some stuff about how we adapt. So while Alex leads us in some reflective music, I'm going to invite you to keep writing your things in the chat or on your paper about what you've learned, and then after our little break, we're going to share some of those things.
As you're writing, if you want to, I know we've been sitting for quite some time now. So if you're feeling like you want to stand up when you sing this, you're welcome to do that as well.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you share some of your stories with me? You will show me compassion, and I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtful, thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me? Stand by me quite willingly. Will you share some of your questions with me? Will show me acceptance. I may learn to give as you do, then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me, comfort me tender? Some of your feelings with me. Will show me commitment, and I may learn to love as you do, then I may learn to love.
Alex. So, what helps you to respond and adapt when things aren't normal? When they aren't the way that you'd hoped they'd be? I'm going to start looking at some chat here, what people are saying. If you're here in person and you want to hold up your paper, if my eyes are sharp enough to read what you wrote, I will call it out. Otherwise, it's about eyesight. I can only share what I can see. So let's see. So some things that people are sharing are that fear is normal. It's part of who we are and the beginning of a bigger conversation. People have also learned about listening to others, about bearing witness, about patience. Thanks, Amy, for writing that big enough for my eyes. That's something else we learn about adapting when things aren't normal too, right? About accommodating others, meeting them where they are. About noticing what other people need. And not expecting that someone's going to be able to read something that small. But if my eyes can only read something that big, helping me out with accommodation, right? These are ways that we adapt when things aren't normal, because after all, who decides what's normal? We also have learned things like not fearing, listening to our fear, and also listening to our fear and adapting to our fear. We've learned things about the joy of community, about breathing and connecting with friends and family. We've learned to slow down and figure out what's happening, to move slowly and carefully. We've learned about staying calm. We've learned about noticing our feelings. And that's one that really responds to something that I talked about in my newsletter in my newsletter for this coming month. You can find a link there. Laura Lipsky, who does a lot of work on trauma, you can also find her work on traumastewardship.com. She talks some about what happens when we're experiencing overwhelm and trauma, the different feelings and behaviors and clues that let us know that we're experiencing this, and how to pay attention to that. Because if we just ignore those things, they don't go away, right? They just sort of magnify. It's like one of the things with the moose is we did notice what we were feeling and we talked about it. And we also talked about what that meant and what we could do with that. We've learned some things about engaging our senses, and that there are people who want to make the world better. We've learned things like figuring out an approach to what's going on with other people. We've learned about being in wonder and reflecting on what happened, keeping going, but also stopping when we need to. We've learned to go quickly and carefully. And we've learned that there are times where it's more important to go slowly and carefully. We've learned a lot about helping each other and about finding a safe destination and getting there. Doesn't have to be the final one, but picking a place we need to go to and getting ourselves there. Some other folks are adding things like using empathy and imagination to try to understand why others do what they do and to have compassion. So, as we kind of wrap up our time of listening to things that we've learned, I know that there are all sorts of other learnings that are kind of bubbling up in the chat and on those pieces of paper that I just can't read. I'm going to share one more tool with you. Earlier I mentioned Laura Lipsky from traumastewardship.com who wrote about trauma stewardship. There's a book as well. They've created a survival guide to help us calm our minds and our bodies and to adapt. And there are some things that she goes through, like protecting our mornings, not letting ourselves get drawn in to things that are going to cause us stress super early. Maybe delaying looking at the news for an hour or even half an hour so that we can enter into the morning with a calmer mind and body. Going outside into nature can help us calm our bodies and our minds too, can help us adjust when we're feeling overwhelmed and trauma. Things like being active, however we can be active based on our bodies, cultivating relationships, being grateful, simplifying, admiring art and laughing, getting enough sleep, fostering humility and extending grace, and being realistic and compassionate. These are all things that can help us as we adjust to things that decidedly aren't normal and as we keep going. And so, with all this wisdom that we have gathered, with all this wisdom from our lives, I hope that you keep sharing it with each other and learning and growing with it as we go forward into this new not normal, knowing that it doesn't have to be normal. It can be what it is, and we will be okay, and we will be together, even in not normal, because not normal has all sorts of gifts. So may it be. Blessed be, and amen. And now, Lori, the offering.
How we give, what we do with our lives, our time, and our resources is a reflection of our values. In response to the abundance we are blessed with, every week this congregation donates generously to organizations in the community whose work aligns with our values and principles. In months with 5 Sundays, the UUS Social Justice Team chooses 1 week for a special offering. Today is this month's chosen 5th Sunday, and the offering and the donations will support the earthquake-stricken nation of Haiti. The UUS Service Committee's emergency support team will work with their established partners in Haiti to ensure the funds will provide food, water, and shelter to the neediest. On the screen, you will see instructions for how to give online, or you may take this time to write a check and address an envelope to UUS to be put in the mail. You may also assist our regular community partner for August, the Free Medical Clinic, contribute to the congregation to provide additional support for our operating expenses, or contribute towards your pledge to our society. The offering is a sign of commitment to this free congregation, which is completely supported by the voluntary generosity to all who join with us. As we receive and give the offering, may we be transformed by our giving, and may the world be transformed by our gifts. nurturing gratitude, and how we understand and express interdependence is part of how we live our Unitarian Universalist faith. May what has been shared today help us more fully affirm our interconnection and live into love and justice. Immediately after the service, we will have time for all to join in conversation and community, whether you're online or in the sanctuary. After the person, a host will explain the process for that location. During this time, we invite you, if you so choose, to reflect on today's pondering question in the All Ages RE room or in a gathering of your choosing. And as a reminder, the questions are: is there something that you're afraid of? Is there something that you used to be scared of during the past year or so that you've become less afraid of? And again, inviting you to join Marcia, if you'd like, in the All Ages room after the service in a breakout room to discuss these questions. And now, to close our service today, we will sing hymn number 1020 in the blue hymnal, Oyaya.
The words are on the screen too, if you don't have your book along. But if you, again, if you are feeling like you would like to be standing for singing, you are welcome. This is rather a standy sort of movie sort of song, maybe. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know within. Oh yeah, yeah, 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 oh yeah,
Join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. All these we carry in our hearts and in our minds until we are together again. That's tricky.
As we move into the week ahead, may we all Notice what our hearts and our bodies are telling us about what is normal and what is not normal. May we lean into gratitude. May we learn from ourselves and each other. And may we all continue to live love ever more fully and fiercely into this world. Go in peace, love, and justice, always. Amen, and blessed, blessed be.
We have a new choral benediction, so I'm sorry if you are missing Dave Rose, but look for information in this week's weekly email about how you can be a part of this one if you like.
May we carry this light in ourselves. May we kindle the light in each other. And may we use our light to bring justice in this world. Blessed be, blessed be, blessed be.
You don't have to stay standing for this if you don't want.